It was supposed to be a night of laughter and nostalgia, a legendary Hollywood icon sitting down with one of late-night television's most recognizable faces. The crowd cheered as Clint Eastwood, a titan of American cinema, walked onto the set of Jimmy Kimmel Live. Dressed in his signature rugged style, Eastwood gave a modest wave, his piercing eyes scanning the audience with the calm presence of a man who had stared down the barrels of both cameras and conflict. But what began as a warm and respectful conversation quickly spiraled into an emotionally charged showdown one that would leave the audience stunned, the cameras abruptly cut, and Eastwood walking off the set in silence. The interview started with light banter. Jimmy, always known for his sharp wit, poked fun at Clint's age, referencing his 95th birthday earlier in the year. "You're like the cowboy who just refuses to ride off into the sunset," Jimmy joked. Clint cracked a smile. "That's because I built the sunset," he replied, drawing applause from the audience. They laughed. For a moment, it seemed like the chemistry was just right. But the conversation took a turn when Jimmy brought up Eastwood's long-standing views on Hollywood, politics, and modern social movements. "So, Clint, you've been known for your, let's say, unfiltered opinions. Do you ever think maybe it's time to let the next generation shape the culture?" There was a pause. Clint straightened in his seat, his jaw tightening. "Let them shape it. Jimmy, I've been making films that shaped this country's conscience long before half of today's directors were born. I don't apologize for having a spine." Jimmy grinned nervously. "I'm just saying some people might say your movies are stuck in the past, too masculine, too traditional." Eastwood narrowed his eyes. "You mean they have principles, that they stand for something other than cheap applause?" The mood shifted. The audience, unsure whether this was part of the show or something more serious, quieted. Jimmy tried to pivot. "But Clint, don't you think today's audiences want something more inclusive? Less guns, more empathy?" Clint leaned forward. "You don't understand something, Jimmy. Empathy isn't a slogan. It's what you do when no one's watching. I've seen war. I've lived through real pain. And I've told stories to help people understand the cost of both. Don't lecture me about empathy from behind a desk." The tension on set was now palpable. Jimmy, flustered, tried to regain control. "I respect you, Clint. I really do. But maybe the world's just moved on. Maybe the era of tough guys solving everything with grit and a gun it's over." That was the final straw. Clint stood up slowly. The audience gasped. "You want to tell stories that matter? Stop hiding behind punchlines. Stop tearing down the past just because you don't have the courage to build something better. I came here to talk about legacy, not to be mocked for having one." With that, Clint turned his back to the stage lights and walked off. The cameras cut to commercial, but the damage was done. Behind the scenes, the fallout was immediate. Social media erupted, some applauding Clint for standing his ground, others criticizing him for being out of touch. Kimmel's camp released a statement saying the exchange had gotten unexpectedly intense, while Eastwood's team declined to comment. But what few people saw was what happened the next morning. Jimmy Kimmel, unable to shake the encounter, showed up at Clint's house in Carmel, unannounced. No cameras, no entourage. Just a man with a conscience. Clint opened the door himself. "You've got nerve," Clint said. "I came to say I was wrong," Jimmy replied. "You weren't just angry. You were hurt. And I treated you like a soundbite." Clint didn't speak for a while. Then he stepped aside and let Jimmy in. Over coffee. Two very different men had a real conversation about art, responsibility, pain, and growth. Jimmy listened. Clint explained. And slowly, the tension that had erupted in front of millions melted into something powerful. Mutual understanding. Weeks later, Jimmy invited Clint back on the show. This time, it wasn't just for laughs or ratings. It was to tell the story behind the clash, to show that people could disagree passionately, painfully, and still come together with respect. The episode opened not with applause, but with a moment of silence, followed by Clint's voice. The mark of a man isn't how loud he speaks, it's how willing he is to listen, even when it's hard. The audience stood and clapped not for a cowboy, not for a host, but for two men brave enough to admit they were human. In the end, the story wasn't about a clash. It was about reconciliation. In a world that feeds on outrage, Clint Eastwood and Jimmy Kimmel reminded everyone that the most courageous thing you can do is to keep talking.